Hey, everybody. Welcome to Winners, Wallets, and Worldviews. I'm your host, AJ Armstrong. You can follow me on Instagram at Aaron Armstrong33, or you can go to my website, aaronjarmstrong.com. Folks, today we had an incredible guest. Her name is Deborah Wanger. She is a phenomenal thespian theater performer, actress. She's worked in film and she's worked in Hollywood. And we're going to hear a lot of her kind of success secrets, as well as some of the darker secrets of working in the film industry. And as someone that's gone through an array of really, dark places and difficult challenges herself, she was able to kind of pull herself out of that with some incredible different experiences and success tips that you guys are going to hear about today. So a little bit about Deborah. Deborah Wanger is an actor, singer, and Bulletproof Human Potential Institute certified wellness coach, trained by Dave Asprey and Dr. Mark Atkinson. She performed in theaters, screens, and cabarets from New York to LA. She's sought after speaker who's given workshops at university theater programs and corporate groups across the country. She's also the author of the Amazon best-selling book, The Resilient Actor: How to Kick Ass in Business Without It Kicking Your Ass. While working at the Creative Artists Agency, she helped guide the careers of many top names that you guys will all recognize, including Halle Berry, Antonio Banderas. Deborah lives in San Diego currently with her 3 children and her dog. She has an album, because she's a singer as well, Driving My Own Heart, which is available on Amazon and iTunes. The Resilient Actor, her book, is also available on Audible. Guys, you will really appreciate this story as we dissect some different films you guys might have watched or TV shows, but as well as learning about how can you compete in the top industry despite some of the losses or some of the success challenges you might face. How do you still get out there and go dominate and rock in life? And we had an incredible discussion today, and Deborah really rocked the podcast. So guys, without further ado, welcome to the show.
Welcome to Winners, Wallets, and Worldviews, the only show that's going to teach you
how to be somebody.
Where in your life did you learn that you're not good enough?
Take what you're most passionate about and what you're most fearful of, and what is the plan to overcome that fear, and what is the plan to enact that passion.
Welcome to Winners, Wallets, and Worldviews. I am your host, AJ Armstrong. You can follow me on Instagram at AaronArmstrong33, or you can always go to my website, AaronJArmstrong.com. Today, we have a very special guest on the other line. We have Deborah Wanger, and she is going to tell us some really cool stuff. I want to give you guys a little bit of a spiel, because she knows some of the deep secrets of Hollywood. She knows a lot of things, too, about just personal success and kind of mastering your own personal brand in a way. So we're going to really have some interesting topics. So, Deborah, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. So happy to be here.
Well, I want to give the audience a little background about you. So if you could kind of go back, tell me a little bit about, maybe your upbringing, your childhood, and kind of how that rolled into your story.
Okay. Well, I was born and raised in Chicago, Illinois, in the Midwest, and to a family of intellectuals and financial people. And, we did have, my grandmother was a sculptor, but most of us were, the currency was being smart and that kind of success. Creativity was not necessarily the greatest value that someone could bring to the world.
Oh yeah, I get it.
Though it was important to be clever, and there was always competition of who could have the best puns at the dinner table. That was always of great value. But I grew up, and my brother, one of my older brothers, used to do theater. Jeremy Piven, the guy from Entourage.
Yeah,
he's an actor. His parents owned a theater school in Chicago, and so my brother was in the same cohort as Jeremy Piven, John Cusack, Joan Cusack, all these like amazing people when they were kids. And I used to go after school and watch these guys perform, and they were phenomenal then. It was obviously they had star quality even back then. And so I was like, I want to do that. So I did. And my brother ended up dropping out and doing sports and other things, but I stuck with it. And I loved performing. I'd sing, I'd dance, do the choir. Any chance to be on stage or perform, I'd love to do that. And so I was a theater geek in high school.
How did your family respond to that? Knowing that, because I mean, especially to the intellectual that you kind of describe, I'm picturing someone that's kind of like, well, theater, what are you going to do with that? Kind of.
Yeah, they thought it was cute.
Yeah.
I mean, I was talented, so that helped. It wasn't, I could sing, and I was obviously very passionate about it, but they always thought that I was basically signing up to be a professional waitress, and that someday I'd have a real career, or I'd marry well and I'd be okay, something like that. But
Right.
I mean, I was coming from like, my dad went to MIT, my mom went to Harvard, like they were like brainiac people.
Oh,
So
yeah.
yeah, they just thought it was cute. I'd outgrow it at some point. I think
So,
they're
so,
still waiting for that.
so you're a theater thespian kind of person in high school,
Yes, very much so.
and what happens from there?
Then I went off to Cincinnati Conservatory, which is a very well-respected musical theater program, and it was a professional program where like you didn't take a lot of academics, just the ones you absolutely had to, and it was boot camp, just singing, acting, dancing all day long. And I did that. So that was a big deal that I got accepted into that program, and I was supposed to be happy because it was like, an elite program, and I was not happy. It wasn't the program's fault, or it wasn't a match. They had a new head of the department at the time who I didn't like his style. There's some people in performing and arts, they feel like they have to break you down to build you back up.
Yep.
And that kind of military style.
Yeah, I get it.
And
That's
oh yeah, yeah. And
I went
which
to
I
West
think,
Point, so that's kind of like.
oh, okay. So yeah.
So you get, I get the starting from the bottom.
You signed up
kind of
for
thing.
that though. You knew you were going into military.
Very true.
stuff.
Very true.
Whereas a lot of young actors and artists and singers and ballerinas and things are usually pretty tender. A lot of people get into the arts because they're sensitive souls. So I had a lot of work to do on myself, and it was too much for me. So I was like, I got to get out. And I was offered a job to do a production of Fiddler on the Roof in Florida in February. It was freezing cold, Cincinnati, Ohio. I was unhappy in the middle of February, and someone said, do you want to come do a professional show in Florida?
I'll pay you to take that job.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm like, peace out. So I'm like, I'll take a quarter off, just see what happens, go do a show. And I ended up staying in Florida for 4 years because I just got work. I was working, I was getting shows, I was doing what I had been training to do. And it started out great. And I was working a fair amount. There's a lot of live theater in Florida because all these old people from New York go down to Florida, and that's what they want to do. That's their entertainment. Is they go to dinner, dinner at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and then they go to the theater. So there was a lot of work, and it was really fun. But I was not healthy. I was depressed and overweight, and got into an eating disorder. And when I had periods of unemployment, I was very isolated, and it was interesting because I was finally kind of getting what I had wanted. That I had some professional success, but I was personally very unhappy, and unhealthy, and I really had very few skills on how to take care of myself as a human. And so I did another geographical cure, and this will come full circle later on and kind of make sense in my whole my whole story. It's like, why are you telling me that you were fat and unhappy and broken out and hated your life?
We've all been there.
Yeah, well, yeah. First of all, because I think a lot of people go through that.
Yeah, so
And
everybody can relate to.
I tried different diets, I tried therapy, I tried all kinds of stuff, and everything worked a little, nothing worked a lot. And so then I decided I was going to go back to college and just get a BA. I said, I have the opportunity to get a college degree. I'd be an idiot not to get one. So I decided to go back, and I moved to Boston. And at this point, I had gotten into 12-step programs and recovery and stuff. And Boston has a phenomenal 12-step community. So that helped me a lot. And got a BA in sociology, just used my brain, and discovered that I actually could hack it with the intellectual people. I was like, I wasn't, which was, a realization for me that I didn't know that I was smart. And even though I couldn't keep up with the conversations at my dinner table,
That's something to think about, though. Like, when you paint yourself as this, you're like, oh, I'm a creative. I'm not going to be this analytical or like well-educated person or whatever. And so many people brand themselves that way, but then you realize that No, if you really get into something that you're interested in and really study something and get passionate behind it, you can really start to find that it might actually be one of your strengths.
Absolutely. And, we limit ourselves all the time with what we believe,
Right.
what the stories that we tell ourselves. And I had a story that I was stupid or I couldn't, I was just, nobody liked me except for the fact that I could sing or that I was
Hmm.
a decent actor. And that was a belief I had, which did not serve me well. So going back to college and doing well in school and competing at a major academic institution, and I was like, oh, okay, I'm I'm actually, a reasonably smart person. That's cool, and I have a lot more to bring to the world and a lot more options than I had given myself credit for. And so when I was in Boston, I worked in radio, and I did, that was fun and early with morning radio. You have to get up really early, but that was fun, and I did other things. And I said, oh well, I'm much happier, much healthier. I had lost a bunch of weight. I was kind of more balanced. I thought this real being a real person thing is kind of cool. So I'm like, maybe I'll go have a job that's not acting, but kind of related. So I'm going to go to Hollywood because that's what all healthy, normal, balanced people do, right? So I went to LA. I moved to LA and send my resume out. And within a few weeks, I was working at Creative Artists Agency, which at the time was the biggest, most powerful talent agency in the world.
Yeah.
And Michael Ovitz built that place up. He was like the super agent. He was the one who kind of single handedly made the agent the most powerful person in Hollywood. You could argue that maybe the manager producer is more powerful now, or has the power shifts. But at the time, he was the one who was really putting together interesting packages of stars and really propelling the agent to the most powerful person. And so it was an interesting time to be
How did
there.
you
It was
find
cool.
yourself? How did you find yourself in that position? Because my limited understanding of the world of Hollywood, actually, kind of an interesting story, came from I sat down with a director because I was interested in making films, like everybody, right? When you're in your early 20s, and I
Oh,
was like,
sure.
so where do I go? I said, I want to find. There's got to be someone. A fresh graduate from United States Military Academy at West Point, so I'm like, there's got to be somebody in our network that's a successful director. So I reached out to a director, and he just finished making the film The Outpost with Scott Eastwood and Orlando Bloom, and I think it's on Amazon Prime now. But he sits down with me and we start talking, and I'm just like, what should I do if I want to make it in Hollywood? And he's like, well, here's the thing, you could go to CAA, like you mentioned. He's like, and then there's gonna be Harvard MBAs with you in the mailroom, and you're gonna sit there for a couple of years until you can figure out your way to climb up to the top. And I'm like, okay, interesting. Do you have any other suggestions? And he kind of got into some of the darkness that I think we'll explore in a minute here too, of what you hear about in movies or what you see on TV or on these, Hollywood gossip kind of television channels, is not an exaggeration. In fact, it might actually be an under exaggeration. It's quite significant, but that was kind of his advice. So I'm just kind of curious, how did you find yourself in that position? From what he described, it seems to be, he said, more competitive than Wall Street or any other industry in the entire world. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
I was there for 2 years, and I was an assistant to an agent. First, I'd spent a year as an assistant to a feature talent agent, so like for movies. So he represented movie actors, and then that was not a good fit. He was not a kind human.
Yeah, believe it.
The kind of the
Just
stereotype.
exactly how you picture him, right?
Yeah. I mean, getting yelled at for making typos or having stuff thrown at me. I mean, very much kind of the stereotype. I think a good guy at the core, but there's so much pressure and so much whatever that they're all so stressed. And then I worked for a TV talent agent who was awesome, busy, and it was a crazy job, especially during pilot season. But she was a fabulous human being, and she was a great mentor to me. But a lot of the stuff that you see in the movies or on TV and the stereotypes, a lot of it comes from truth, because there's a lot of that. It is incredibly competitive. It is, there's a lot of, insecurity. There's a lot of, backstabbing and not being very nice. And, I think I assume some of it's got to have changed with all Me Too and, and everything else. Like, I'm sure that there's been some changes, but you know, I forgot who it said. I think Jamie Foxx is attributed with saying it, but some other people have said it too, that Hollywood is like high school with money. And I didn't enjoy high school, so yeah, it's you know, I found it was an incredibly competitive business and not nearly as creative at the level that I was doing it as I was hoping it would be. I mean, I was selling movie stars, but I could have been selling cans of soup or rolls of toilet paper, or it didn't feel uh, immensely creative on the level of what I was doing. I was helping get people to auditions, get people to meetings, and then contracts and deals and, money. And it wasn't about, at the level that I was in it, about the work and the character building and the telling good stories. And
Do you
that was
feel
in
like
there, but it wasn't in my where I was.
do you feel like in that hierarchy that there are positions that have that opportunity for like true creative art to kind of come out? Because in a way, like it seems like, just as me knowing nothing about Hollywood and just watching and being enjoying films, you see that these films are almost just business decisions too. Like you can see they've lost a lot of the art. They've lost a lot of they're just trying to get something done. They've probably run focus groups to change the story into like, this is what we need to talk about, or we need to push this message. And it's like, instead of like, what's the story you're telling, and allowing that to like kind of be as pure in just the story that you just decided to tell. You see that as a viewer, and like as you critique films. I'm just kind of curious, do you see that too, or
Absolutely.
do you still think that there's like enough creative liberty in some of these individuals to be able to make a good kind of like indie style film at a blockbuster level, you know?
Well, I think there's tiers of it. I think people who are at the very bottom, who are doing it all on their own, who are making a film for $1.95 and a donut, and guerrilla style, like right out of film school, or filming it on their iPhone or whatever, that level, because they don't have any business deals or any ties or any commitments. They don't have a studio deal. They can do whatever the hell they want, right? Because they're just
Right.
it's all they've filmed it
Just
in their grandma's
YouTubers,
basement.
basically, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So you can do whatever you want, and yes, you can be incredibly creative. And a lot of those people are really pushing the boundaries, and um, but they don't have the financial support usually.
Right.
Unless every once in a while they'll break through, get a film at Sundance, or get a deal or something. But for the most part, they're those scrappy projects. They can be as creative as they want, and there's an integrity to that filmmaking, because they don't have to answer to anyone. And then at the tip top, Steven Spielberg gets Final Cut. He can do whatever he wants. He had to work his ass off for years, but now he's gotten enough Oscars and enough respect and enough great reviews that he can do anything he wants at this point. But everybody else in the middle has that struggle, and I think it is dumbed down a lot. It is about, what do we think the consumer wants? What does middle America want? What does I think you're right, and you can smell it, you can sense it. It feels like, I bet they tried to do it better, and then it just got kind of dumbed down, or
Right.
made more mild, so because of the focus groups or whatever. So I think that is the truth, but it's in the middle. But I think that the extreme ends, there still is that, but it's harder and harder in the middle, especially on the studio level. Warner Brothers they're putting millions and millions and millions of dollars into a movie. They want to protect their investment. They want to be safe.
Right. Yeah, obviously. And I think that makes a lot of sense, but it just becomes like kind of a challenging strategy for young filmmakers, or someone that has aspirations to be at that tippy top level someday, to like, how do you navigate through that? Because I mean, when I sat down with my director friend, that was probably 5 years ago. So YouTube was like kind of becoming a big deal at that point, but not to where it is today, where like people are actually replacing television, and they're replacing TV shows with their favorite YouTubers channels. You know what I mean? And like, if you're looking at where they're placing their attention. And I kind of asked him about that. I'm like, do you see that as the future? And he's kind of like, not really. Maybe if you make an indie film, you could enter it into Sundance, and maybe that would be a good way to get some attention. And I was just like, we don't think with YouTube or any of that. And he's like, I don't know, maybe. But now it seems like you could very well make a career off of like some kind of social media channel. I've seen people
Absolutely.
do it. It's
There's
crazy.
things that were started as Instagram, uh, influencers or whatever, who now are on Netflix or whatever. And there's definitely a disruption and a change in these systems that have been in place for a long time. And with the pandemic and everything, with people not going to movie theaters, I mean, definitely things are changing. And, now that everybody has a little portable computer in their pocket at all times, it is changing. Whether it will be enough to completely disrupt the system, I don't know. There's some really entrenched way of things that have always been done, but I think things are changing. It'll be really interesting to see how it all shakes out.
Do you see anything in like the forefront of those trends? I had a prediction that I mentioned the other day to my wife is I think we're kind of seeing it a little bit, but we're going to see a comeback of like the short film, I think, on of like serious attention. Where like usually short films were like, I don't have enough money and I want to put together something to build some credentials that I could show somebody with a limited amount of time. But I think we're going to see like actual viewers doing that. I mean, if you scroll through Facebook videos or something like that, right, you'll see 10 to 15-minute documentaries that are actually quite interesting that capture you for 15 minutes. And you're just like, wow, what just happened? And I think that like that might be an avenue people could explore. But I'm curious, what do you think is like the kind of trends that you're seeing or that you're feeling?
And with people's limited attention spans, 15
Right.
minutes of telling a story or 10 minutes of telling a story is awesome.
So 2.5 hour movie is a heck of a commitment for a Gen Zer, right?
Oh, totally. Yeah. Yeah. And especially because you can tell a good filmmaker can tell a lot of story in 10 minutes, in 5 minutes. Imagery is it can be really powerful. And, it takes a lot of time and a lot of money to make a full length feature. I mean, that's a lot. So that wouldn't surprise. It's funny because you think about like the Oscars in the past. When have you seen, the best documentary short? Like how often have you seen
Right.
those? Very few people. So, but now with social media and the internet, and I mean, a lot of the film festivals were online this year only. Like Sundance and Cannes and whatever they did, it was online. And so we had access to stuff we would have been very difficult to have. I mean, unless you go to Sundance, unless you go to Cannes, unless you go to some of these festivals, it's hard to to have access to these things. So I definitely think that's a trend. The fact that you don't need millions of dollars of equipment anymore, that you
Right.
can do it on your iPad or your iPhone and get a pretty decent product. I mean, so any kid in their basement has the same access to things that you couldn't do without a major studio in the past. So it's and hopefully we are also going to be paying more attention to diverse voices, the BIPOC voices, other stories besides the stories that rich white men want to tell.
Sure.
And that's traditionally who's been controlling the studios for the most part. So I think that also is a change of what stories are being told. And the fact that everyone has access to the technology allows a more diversity of stories to be told and people to different voices. So I think that's cool too.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Well, okay, so back to, I guess that was a nice
And
little
now back to my life.
diversion.
When last we left Deborah, she was okay. So I was in LA, worked at the agency. Then I worked as a manager. Like I was a junior manager, and
So it was mostly like production career, it sounds like, and not so much
behind the
acting.
scenes. Yeah,
Or-
I wasn't
or-
acting at all, and
Okay.
that's a major conflict. Like if you're, they're both full time gigs, and I was not an actor at that point. I was a former actor at that point.
Gotcha.
Which was cool because I knew how to talk to actors and I knew what their needs were, and I kind of understood that. I spoke actor, but at that point I was not one, and there wouldn't have been time to do that. And it's not like you can sneak your resume into the pile or anything. Yeah, no, that's majorly frowned upon. And I've never really saw myself as a glamorous, movie star person. I always did mostly stage stuff. I've done a little bit of film and TV, but mostly just live theater. So I was working as a manager, and I got fired from that job in a brutal. They just called me one night, like, "We packed up all your stuff. Come get it."
I shouldn't laugh. That's terrible.
I know, and now I can, but it was like, it totally pulled the rug out from under me. It's like
You didn't
it
get
was
thrown
so,
out
like-
by security into the puddle, right? Like
Yeah.
that classic scene.
Yeah, exactly. With just that one little box.
Yeah, the one little box in the rain.
Yeah, with my coffee mug and it felt like that. And it was like I wasn't warned, I wasn't, brought into someone's office and, there's things I could be working on, just you're out. And I don't think I'd ever been fired from anything before. That's awfully
So it just
humbling.
totally blindsided you. No,
Oh, totally.
no
I mean, I don't think I
feedback.
was great at it, but I was hired by this woman and she was going to take me under her wing and teach me everything she knows. And then she was busy and just kind of like threw me in the deep end of the pool and, I sucked at it. And anyway, so
And life
I
goes
was
on.
like, I had been fired. So now with my tail between my legs, I had to figure out what to do. And I think, I'm not really enjoying this Hollywood business thing. I think it's incredibly competitive, as we spoke about, and not very creative. And if I'm going to work this hard at something, I want to work hard at something I really love.
Sure.
And this wasn't it. And I said, okay, I am at a chance to reinvent myself. And I really made an effort to visualize, what do I want my life to look like? And very intentionally, and it sounds a little woo-woo perhaps, but oh well, that I conjured up, what do I want my life to look like? And I decided I wanted to live in Southern California in a beautiful town like San Diego or Santa Barbara.
Yep.
I wanted to marry a nice Jewish boy and have a couple kids and act a little and teach a little and, learn to play the harp in a sunny window and, live happily ever after. So I said, well, first thing I should do is maybe I should move to either San Diego or Santa Barbara instead of staying in LA and hoping that someone might want to move there with me. So at that time, my brother was down in San Diego, and so he said, if you want to just move in with me and get back on your feet, you can be my roommate for a while. So that's what I did. So I moved down to San Diego, and within 2 months, I had met my now ex, but my husband. Which I thought was a sign, like it was all like lining up. I had manifested all this and everything. And I found out about a graduate program in theater in San Diego. And it was actually run by a woman I had worked with in Cincinnati, years and years and years and years before. So it was just like, I felt like it was all just clicking. So I got my master's in musical theater at San Diego State. They have a phenomenal program, and so it was performing, but it's also teaching you to teach at the university level, which is really cool. So I can now teach theater at the university level because it's a terminal degree in theater. And fell in love with San Diego and got married, and then 3 kids later, and I started a theater career, and ended up getting divorced, and now I'm single with 3 kids, but I'm working in the theater again and enjoying it from a different angle because I chose it. Last time I did it just because that's what I'd always done and that's what I was good at, and I felt like I was just supposed to do it. Now I came back to it appreciating, like, I like this. Now I'm good at it and I like it and it's fun and it feeds my soul and it's playful and I enjoy the people and I like the process, and I feel like I'm actually being artistic and telling stories and moving people or entertaining people or making people laugh or just, having fun. But I still wasn't happy. Like I was happier, but I wasn't happy. I wasn't healthy, especially my first 2 children are twins, which really depleted me. That's a lot.
That's probably a thrill. Yeah.
I love them. And it was just really, really hard on my body. So I started digging into, how do I get healthy? What do I need to do? And I was going to try anything. And I ran across the work of Dave Asprey, the Bulletproof executive, the Bulletproof coffee guy.
Okay.
And this is early on. This is 7 years ago, before the books. And he was like this underground blogger at that point. And he was talking about putting butter in your coffee and eating a lot of fat. And he was talking about keto before anyone else was talking.
Yeah, I used to do all this stuff. I think I used to advertise on this podcast for him.
Oh, seriously? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I started going bulletproof and I started doing all that stuff and it was working for me. And I lost weight and my skin cleared up. And I was like, okay, finally I'm finding something that works, helping with my moods, helping with a lot of stuff. And I helped a friend by kind of informally coaching him lose 80 pounds doing that stuff.
Boom.
Yeah. And, he
Just
got all,
informally coaching, you got to
yeah,
lose it. Wow.
just like, this is what I
Unreal.
know. This is what I do. And he did it and changed his life. I mean, he got off his meds, he got off of, you know, he, looked like a different person. He's like, you're really good at this. You should coach. And I said, well, someday if Dave ever has a coaching program, I'll do it. And, whatever. Ha ha ha. And then within a year, I got an email from the Bulletproof people saying, we're starting a coaching program. And I said, well, that decision had already been made because I had already made that decision a year ago. So I had no hesitation about pushing that button. So I did I was in the first cohort ever of coaches that Bulletproof trained. So it was like a 10-month intensive, learned everything about health program. We talked about sleep and nutrition and supplementation and exercise and, stress management and biohacks, big and small, and a lot of science, a lot of and coaching skills and all that. And so I was like, I geeked out on that, and I got certified, and I really enjoyed doing that. And I enjoyed coaching people. I enjoyed helping people. I enjoyed feeling smart, right?
Yeah.
It's in full circle. And so then it's like, okay, now what? So I'm this actor. I've worked in Hollywood. I'm a health coach. What?
How do you brand this, right?
Yeah, exactly. I feel like these like totally unconnected things. I have all these diverse interests. And I was talking with someone and they're like, no, that's you. And those diverse things that don't necessarily seem connected are what makes you interesting. It makes you diverse. It makes you you, is that you have a unique perspective. They're not disjointed, connect the dots. So I did. So I'm like, okay, well, why don't I be a health coach for actors? Right? Because
Boom.
I know both sides of the table. I know the business side of the business and the creative side of the business. And I've been fat and unhappy and unhealthy and crazy, and am, you know, a healthy weight and not too crazy and relatively happy now. So why don't I start with a community that I know? And I started coaching actors, and I started. So I do health, and I call myself a health and wellness coach, but I'll work with people on whatever their goals are,
Yeah.
whether it's financial or personal. But a lot of it starts with feeling good and having energy and having a proper mindset and all that. And then the books came out of that, and here I am.
Well, it's kind of funny because like, yeah, first glance, it doesn't seem like a lot of these different things are related, right? You have like health, you have acting, you have life, you have motivation, you have business, you have like all these things. But when I look at maybe it's just me, but like when I look at life coaches and like people that are actors in a way and people that are directors or like helping people like knowing a lot about a person seems to be the similarities that you guys all have together, right? Like to be like successful actors can put themselves into another person's entire life, right? And they can just understand their motives, they can understand their perspectives. Great life coaches can do that, where they can just like, yeah, even though I know nothing about your industry or what you're doing, I get it. I understand exactly what's going on. And you can completely place yourself into that person. And it's this like empathetic kind of personality that seems to thrive in those environments. And I think in a lot of ways, that's why actors and life coaches are very similar. They have to be able to understand any personality, right? You have to be extroverted, introverted, dominant, submissive, whatever these people seem to be like. And you have to be able to kind of like understand that really well to be able to do your job effectively. What do you think about that? Because I
No,
think that's something very similar.
I had never thought about it exactly like that, but I think that there's a lot of truth to that. I mean, there's a understanding of psychology,
Right.
and there's an understanding of basic human needs, and that
Personality.
personality, and that we're all kind of, um, we all want the same things. We all want to be loved. We all want to be heard. We all want to feel important. We all want, adventure and excitement and uncertainty, but we also want predictability. We all want those same things. But yeah, I think there is to be able to listen and see and have the empathy and compassion to kind of get to the distillate of what's going on, and you know see through all the things that people say and hear what they're really saying. I think that's interesting. So yeah, I
Yeah.
meant to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, see, look at that. No, but it is kind of something interesting with a lot of young actors. I'm just, I guess, guessing what the industry does, but I imagine a lot of times it's about having a certain look or having a certain image that you're going to portray on camera. But like when you're younger, you don't necessarily like get into the depth of a character because you don't really know that much about people yet. You don't really know that much about how the world works. You don't really understand all the motives. And it's like, I feel like looking back on myself 10 years ago, now I understand so much more like depth behind why a person might do what they do in a certain circumstance. And it's like, I feel like that would make actors so much better if they could understand the world the same way that like a great life coach could, you know what I mean? Where like they've reflected on like, yeah, these basic human needs we talked about, like what's really waking me up every day? Well, what are the struggles I'm going through? And it's like that level of depth would totally come across on camera. And I feel like that is something that actors would really benefit from when they could just totally understand humans at their deepest level.
Absolutely. And I think there's a wide range. I think it depends on the medium. I think television, then film, and then theater there's kind of a hierarchy as far as the importance put on appearance versus, acting talent or depth or,
Right.
understanding. I think, to overgeneralize on that. But yeah, it is kind of just to be pretty, or sexy or whatever is the most important thing. I think it also depends on the director you're working with. Some directors really want to talk and dig and have those psychological conversations. And do you understand your character and, write a biography of your character? Or let's, spend hours really diving in. And some people are like, hit the mark, say the right line, don't bump into anything and get out, and there's a range. So I think part of it is the environment that you're working with, and the some actors are, what's my motivation? That old thought. And some are just like, I don't know. It just says I'm supposed to kiss her and then walk away. So that's what I do.
Do you
So
think that there's an like in directing that is fairly significant when you've just kind of, I was observing the industry, that directors that do insist on getting to that level of depth, that it does show in the work? Or do you think that's an excessive level of detail that really hit
uh,
or miss?
I think it can show in the work. I mean, it's what's really interesting is I just finished binge watching Schitt's Creek. You know that show?
Oh, I just started that one. Yeah.
Yeah, it starts off a little slow, but it gets great. And you know, you think about. I mean, it's a sitcom,
Yeah.
and it's
It's
rich.
Gilligan's Island, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Totally it's Gilligan's Island or Modern Family or what. So wacky rich family loses their money and they have to live in a motel of in a town of misfits. Ha ha ha. Right, and it could just be like, meh, meh. But the uh to watch these characters and how they grow and how they interact, and it's not just funny, it's very sweet, it's very touching. As you continue with the series, you'll see. I found myself incredibly emotionally connected to these characters, and way more than watching a lot of sitcoms where you're like, haha, you insulted mom spaghetti, waka waka waka, or
Right,
whatever.
right. Just shallow
and
humor.
and then digging a little deeper, they did a ton of character work on that show before they even filmed anything. They talked about these characters and talked about these characters and talked about, kind of in the tradition of like Christopher Guest and Eugene Levy and, all those movies like Best in Show and Waiting for Guffman. And, they called it like a very character based comedy. So they did unbelievable amounts of character work and have those kind of discussions, and really were thoughtful and careful in the writers' room of making these, honoring these characters. And I think it does come onto the screen, and you get more than just um, joke, joke, joke.
Yeah, there's a lot of
Yeah.
there's a lot of depth with the characters. You can totally tell in that show because there's stuff that's kind of that I don't think would be noticed as much if they didn't do the character work. For example, like this kind of dichotomy between the middle America and the coasts, right? Is I think a theme that comes out in the show a lot, where you have kind of these rich West Coast family or whatever, but then you have these like kind of like hodunk people in this town. And it's like, that's not like a central theme, but it's the acting on either side of that, that you understand these deeper worldviews and how they see everything and how that causes conflict. That is, I think, the work that you're talking about, that level of depth in this show specifically. That's, I think, very impressive.
Yeah, so I think it does come out on the screen a lot of times. Now, it's also possible to do too much, and then you're paralyzed by thinking about it too much and overanalyzing it. Sometimes you need to just shut up and say the lines. So there is a middle ground. Have you heard that Dustin Hoffman?
Yeah, that was in that book.
story?
He actually recommended me, my director
Oh
friend,
yeah,
the Adventures in the Screen Trade.
yeah, with Laurence Olivier, and it's during Marathon Man.
Yeah,
You know,
when he's like, yeah, my
yeah,
character
and
wouldn't turn the light on, right?
oh yeah, I think, but there's so Dustin Hoffman is like he's supposed to be tortured, or and he's staying up all night and he's drinking all this coffee and he's doing, he's getting really method, and he's all stressed out about it, and Laurence Olivier just looks at him and says, maybe you should try acting, young man. So that there's something to be said for really knowing your character and doing the analysis and stepping in their shoes, but sometimes it's also just shut up and say the words so that you can move on with them. But I do think, in the same way that you can feel like, oh, they compromised on the story, or they sold out a little bit. I think you can tell when there's something deeper with the character as well.
Yeah, acting is such a fascinating thing to me, just because I'm not, immersed in the industry like you are, and like I'm not much of a performer. I speak publicly, and my latest performance was I play in a pretty significant band at our church. It's a pretty elaborate setup, and when we were first learning, I play guitar, right? And when we were first learning, I thought it was about how great of a performance I could make with the guitar. It was like how I envisioned performing. And our music director is just like, no. The point is that you play the part perfectly with the mix. And he's like, it's like acting. He's like, a lot of times actors think it's about being the best character they can possibly be. And he's like, no, it's about, can you fulfill the director's vision perfectly? And it's like, that is the role of the actor. And just like something you don't think about, you're like, oh wow, it's about fulfilling the mission of the entire mix, the entire scene. I thought that was a really interesting way of putting it. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. It's about collaboration. And, there will be times where you might have a solo, and that is your moment to shine. But for the most part, yeah, it's how do you fit into it? I mean, if you're pepper in the stew, you don't need to be the most pepper. You need to be the right amount of pepper to bring out, the balance of spices. But if you do put too much pepper, it ruins the stew, right?
Right.
So yeah, it absolutely is. And that's one of the lessons that young actors often face, is the ego, and you want to be noticed, and you want to be loved, and you want the big part, it all matters, and it's all you got to be the right size. What serves the story? Come back to what serves the storytelling. It's not just about you, and your mom's going to notice you. You're going to notice you, but sometimes there's a maturity to that. There's to accept the fact that there's a humility, and it's not all about me. But even the star, it's not all about them either. I mean, it takes so many people to make a film.
Yeah, they're pulling the story along, really, right? What the star is trying to do. It's not really about them. It's more about how can they fill this role of telling the story.
Yeah. So it's always coming back to, how do you serve the story, or how do you serve the song, or how do you, and there's going to be moments where it is about you, but for the most part, it's how do you fit into the whole.
Yeah, it's just fascinating. I apologize to our listeners if they're not as interested in Hollywood as I am. I think this is great.
But there's life lessons in it too. I don't think a lot of this stuff. Yeah, right? We talk about actors and acting, but collaboration and working with others, being on teamwork. I think that everybody has to work with other people, even if it's not in a professional setting. You have to do it in your family.
Yeah.
You have to do it in your neighbor, in your church, in your whatever. Like you're still a part of something.
One thing too, I think with creatives especially, is like there's this belief that if you're a creative, it conflicts with like this discipline, like rigid kind of personality. And I say, I don't know. Like, I mean, think about, I heard a story when I think it was Charlie Sheen, when they were filming the movie Platoon. Oh, was it Martin Sheen? One of the Sheens, when they were filming Platoon back in the 80s. the director actually made them go out for 2 weeks with like no sleep, like do actual military training, put them through like the ringer, and then started filming because they wanted them on edge. I think it was Oliver Stone or somebody like that made the film, and it was like they wanted to make them feel like they were actually out in the field for a long time. I thought that was a really interesting idea, but you think about how disciplined an actor needs to be to make sure that they're like, I mean, they're probably in uncomfortable situations all the time. They're probably in like things that are painful, but they need to make sure that they're like putting that aside to stay consistent with the role. And I think when people like, you think the creatives aren't disciplined, like learning the instruments, like learning, memorizing the stuff. There's so many benefits to having that kind of like disciplined mentality too. And I think that some of the best actors are actually more disciplined than they probably are creative in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said for that. I think some creatives are very disciplined and often more successful because they are, um, and some aren't. And part of what I address in the book is how to find discipline and set goals and really work on daily habits. It Because sometimes it's hard to work on something when you don't have a job. When you're just, I'm going to work on my craft because I'm going to get a job at some point.
Right.
Is very, or, in the same way, like making cold calls or, doing, having discipline when you don't have to. It's much easier to just sit and watch Netflix and, and eat Doritos or whatever. So having, creating the discipline, thinking if I was that disciplined, awesome person, what would I need to do every single day? Whether it's push-ups or, doing vocal exercises or, meeting with my acting coach weekly or reading plays or memorizing something or, doing that work and creating discipline for yourself because not everybody has that. But I do think that and just the discipline to go to an audition,
Yeah. Right.
or like, well, I don't feel like it, or I've got this, or I've got, no, that's your job. I work with people and I think that auditioning is an actor's job. Performing is the perk of the job, but it's your job. You go, you do it, whether you feel like it or not, so you can pay your rent.
Yeah. I spoke
So,
with an actress that said she got jobs just because she shows up on time. Some people get so into their, like, they'll go to auditions and they show up late and just like, it's like, yeah, I think that's the only reason I got a lot of jobs is because I would show up actually on time, like a couple minutes early. And she was a Navy veteran. So she's like, that's just how I learned how to work. But I think there is something to say that like the themes of success, I think are are always the same in a lot of ways. Cross industry. Like, yes, I think actresses and actors require a significant amount of talent like anybody, but I think that the themes of what it takes to be great seem to be the same kind of indicators in a lot of ways. It's about like that work on yourself, that self-discipline, being able to kind of take the risks, as you said in multiple times in your story, being able to kind of like take that leap and grow and kind of face adversity and face fear.
absolutely, and being easy to work with. Not being a
Oh, yeah, that's
jerk
great.
is
Yeah.
really important in all industries because yes, talent will get you in the door, but to keep you around, people always want to work with people they can rely on. The people who are going to be on time, the people who are going to be kind, the people who are going to be respectful, the people who are going to roll with it, the people aren't going to bitch and moan. I mean, if I think most people, if you had the choice between two candidates, and one was 97% talented but always reliable, and the other guy was 98% talented but kind of flaky, then almost always most people would go with the reliable person.
Right.
And that's something else that it takes some people a long time to learn that. Don't be a jerk. um, when you have, especially when there's a lot of money riding on it or there's time riding on it, to know someone who's reliable and will be there on time and, has
Yeah.
a
You
decent
can't
sense of
play
humor,
these
whatever.
games,
Like,
right?
oh, totally. Absolutely. Absolutely. So that's in, I think, every industry.
Yep.
So, you know, the people who are, if you're a jerk, no one has the patience for that.
Right. Yeah, I think it's just great advice for anybody, who's early in their career. But, we talked a lot about acting and I think that the Hollywood industry. Tell me a little bit more. I wanted to kind of give a glimpse into maybe some of the untold stories of Hollywood in a way that,
Untold stories in
me coming
Hollywood.
from the Midwest, like, what do I know? And I just see right or left wing conspiracy theories on YouTube, and that's about all I know. And I just want to get it from the horse's mouth, like what's really going on in the underground over here.
Yeah, please, can we talk about anything but politics?
Right, right.
Yeah.
We boldly do not go there on this
Yeah, exactly.
podcast.
Like, oh, yeah, I can't wait for this news cycle to change. Well, let's see. I mean, it's interesting because you talked about things that you can kind of sense when you watch a movie. One thing that I had always wondered about before I had gotten into the business side of things is you see these movies with that are just crap. You know,
Yeah,
like it's just
yep.
not a good movie.
Seen plenty of them.
Yeah, and you're like, how did this get made, or why is this person in this movie? You're like, did they know it was crap? And I think that there are examples of they thought it was going to be good, like Showgirls. They actually thought they were making like the greatest movie ever, and I, they were hyping it up, and every woman of that age in Hollywood wanted that part, and it was like it was big, and Elizabeth Berkley was going to be the biggest star ever, and it was like, and then it came out, and everyone's like, oh my god, this is like it's now a cult camp classic because it's so bad. But
Yeah, right.
they really tried. They really
It's
tried
like
to
The
make it.
Room.
Yeah, yeah. So that was a stinker. But a lot of times they do know. They do know. A lot of times actors, when they take Sharknado 7 or whatever,
Right.
but they've got alimony and they have to pay in 10% to an agent and 10% to a publicist and 5% to their attorney and their manager. And they've got a house in Malibu and a house on Maui. And like a lot of times they do know and they just have to work,
Yeah.
like we all do things sometimes, you drive, do DoorDash or drive, do a couple extra Uber shifts or whatever, because you got to pay your rent. So there's some people who've, a lot of times they do know. So that's kind of but you got to eat, you got to pay, you got to pay your child support. So
I always wondered that though. That's a great point. Like, do they know this movie sucks the whole time? And I mean, I suppose like you could read a script and a lot of people could be like have very different visions of what that could look like. You've seen all those like experiments where they give like 5 different directors the same script and then it all shows like just totally different movie and stuff. You're like, yeah, it could very well be that. But in a lot of cases, it's like, you probably know if this story just is not an interesting story, right?
yeah, and there's a lot, like we were talking about earlier. It's like a lot of things start out great, and then just too many cooks, and things just get watered down and just goes south. But I think but there are definite examples where people know it's just not a great film, and they got to work, and they just suck it up and get, hold their nose and get their paycheck. So
One thing like you always see, or like we always see, I guess, on the middle America, just going to work and just whatever. But you kind of just like you see like Hollywood is just like this corrupt circle of like power hungry moguls just screwing people over is what you picture, almost just like politicians, or you would like on Wall Street. Like you just have these characterized images of what it looks like. I mean, is there truth to that at all, or is it like is it really that? Like these just people blackmailing each other and stuff like that, or is that just kind of more
there's
of
some
hyperbole?
of that. I think there are some bad apples, and there are some, the people driving the fancy convertibles and only will date supermodels and
Right.
gossiping and and all that kind of stuff. But I think there's also, I think the majority of people are decent people who want to create art, and they're trying, and there's a lot of people just hanging around waiting, trying. So I don't think that's the majority of the people, but there's enough of that, and that's the people who are jerks are such big jerks that it kind of it overshadows, and some of them have a lot of power and a lot of money, and people like Harvey Weinstein can do a lot of damage.
Yeah.
And he ruined careers, and he ruined lives, and the whole system let it happen.
Right.
And it wasn't just him. There were people who looked the other way. There are a lot of people who looked the other way. Well, I'm trying to bring down the room. But I
We got to say the juicy stuff. You know?
I'm trying to I'm trying to think of, you want like good stories about, but there's definitely backstabbing and I've been yelled at by some famous people. I've also had really random conversations.
What was the most awkward scolding you've gotten by a famous person?
Oh, I don't know if I could say, I don't, I want to be respectful, but
Yeah, I got you.
a high powered producer who,
Like we would know the name if you said
you
it.
might not know his name, but you would know a lot of the projects he did
Gotcha.
for sure. But I just remember like him calling from an airplane. And this was, at the time was a big deal to be calling from a plane, and it was just, do you know who I am? And get your boss on the phone and I'm on a friggin' plane. And he didn't use friggin', blah, blah, that kind of stuff.
Bleep.
Oh, well, here's a kind of a fun story, I guess. So, and I don't want to use specific names because I want to be respectful, but okay. So major studio film that had been shot but had not been released yet. I get a call from the director's people that we were representing one of the actors who had a major supporting part in this. He had a good sized part in this, and so they wanted to do some reshoots. So sometimes they'll make a movie, and then when they're editing it, they realize they either want to change something or they don't have the right. They need just a little bit more film to make the story make sense or how they want to do it. So sometimes they do something called reshoots. So they have to get some of the actors back to redo a scene or to add an additional scene or whatever. So, so this is a pretty famous director who was in France or Switzerland or something. So he's calling from Switzerland. It's now the weekend. The actor that they need, you would know his name, had. I called him and I said, so-and-so needs you to be in Zurich or whatever to reshoot this movie. And he said, well, I've already grown a beard for my next project, so I can't do it. So, which I think is basically like, give me money, so,
Right.
So, and, doing this other project. And so I'm now talking to this guy in Switzerland and then this guy in, I don't know, at his ranch in Utah or wherever, back and forth. He won't shave the beard. Tell him to shave the beard. How much does he need to shave the beard? I'm like, prosthetic beard? So we're going back and forth on the weekend. And in the middle of the night, I'm getting phone calls about, will this famous actor shave their beard? And it got down to this. So I think eventually for $50,000 or something, he'd be willing to shave his beard or something. Like, hey, would you take that deal? Would you?
I honestly don't think I would shave this beard for $50,000.
Okay. And a part in a movie?
Well, I know that what's his face, Billy Gibbons with ZZ Top was offered $1 million by Gillette to shave his beard, and he didn't do it.
Well, that was I mean, how long has he been growing that beard?
I don't know. That beard is a beard, though.
Yeah. Yeah, that's iconic. Yeah, I mean
that's an awesome story, though. Yeah, I just imagine like the kind of things you run into. I always thought about that too. Like like these, did they really grow that beard in that film? And it's like, and how do they do like multiple jobs at once? When they have a beard going, or like a hairstyle or something like that.
Yeah,
I suppose those are problems that people have figured out that are
right. Well, that's why they have agents and managers and
that's why they called you,
because
you need to figure
pay you the big bucks. But yeah, but also remember, a lot of times someone will go and work on a movie for 2 or 3 weeks, and because they often will shoot it out of sequence. So
right.
Even someone's in the first 5 minutes and then an hour in or whatever, they might shoot it all in one lump. They're not going to stay around for the whole.
I imagine
months.
Just coordinating schedules is a disaster.
Oh yeah,
I mean, just like trying to schedule like podcast guests is a lot of work,
Yeah, and that's 2 people. That's 2
right.
people and a couple of microphones.
Imagine like all these big time A-listers, like, and whatever they got going on.
Right. You need to get 150 people to Cairo all at the same time, because it's not just the actors who have all kinds of schedules, but it's the hairstylists and the makeup people and the gaffers and the best boys and the the grips and the DPs, all of it. So it's quite a coordination. So
wow.
But it's cool. It's so collaborative that there's so many people who are working on it. It's not just the couple actors that you see. There's so many people in the soup.
Well, I think the last couple questions before we wrap up today. This has been great, and I've really enjoyed learning about this industry, and I think there's so many just like other just you could take away the knowledge from the most competitive industry in the entire world, and how people have navigated through that, like yourself, and share that in anything that you do. And I think that that's going to be fantastic advice and fantastic strategies. But I think the last couple questions, the first one is just what general advice would you have for someone just kind of they could be starting their career in acting or in the creative arts, or they could be starting their career in something totally unrelated. What would you say to that person if you could give them a couple minutes?
Well, I think the first thing that I would say is don't put all your eggs in one basket. I think a mistake that I made and a lot of people make is don't derive all of your value from your career and your success. So if that's everything to you, if it's an actor or a real estate agent or an entrepreneur, or whatever, it, if you put all of your value into that, when things are going well, you're happy. When things aren't going well, you're not. And with a lot of careers, especially when it's entrepreneurship, and actors are a kind of entrepreneur. When you're generating your own work, you're going to go through ups and downs.
Hmm.
You're going to go through differences in the economy. There's going to be pandemics. There's going to, stuff's going to happen, and you need to ride the waves and not be completely reliant on your happiness and your feeling okay and having value with your success. So having other interests, having other friends, having an additional stream of income, whatever it is. But now notice I didn't say safety net. Notice I didn't say, what if, you fail, but having just an additional stream. So you can surf the waves better. So I would
That's
say,
very relatable because I find myself making that mistake all the time. It's like, when things are going great, that's how I measure my worth, is like, this is progress. And then when things aren't going great, because it's whether it's part of the business cycle or whether it's just part of things that happen in life, I feel like I take the blame for that. And I can totally understand that. I think that's a fantastic tip for people to try to disassociate your worth with money. Some people look at their bank account and that's their measure of success. And it's just like, no, it's just a data point that shows you how much purchase power you have at a certain point in time. That's not nothing to do with your worth,
but
So
there's
no,
personal success, romantic success, family
right.
success, social success,
Health,
contribution, health, and there's so many pieces that make us interesting, valuable, awesome people, and to make sure that we're well rounded and not just looking at the one data point. Absolutely.
yeah, no, wonderful advice. I would think that's going to be something that everybody should listen to at any point in their life of where they could look at it. I think what's his face calls that the wheel of life. Is having all these different aspects of, you look at social, spiritual, wealth, health, all these types of things as there's sprockets on a wheel, and you don't want one to be shorter than the other, otherwise the wheel won't spin.
Right.
And it's like that's kind of that Zig Ziglar, I think he's the one that said that. So, but anyway, the last question is, if people want to dig into your work, your story, a little bit more about you. You mentioned you're the author of a couple of different books. Where can people get some more, or get in contact with you, or stay involved with what you're doing?
Well, my book is The Resilient Actor: How to Kick Ass in the Business Without It Kicking Your Ass. And it's available on Amazon and Audible. I just recorded the audiobook of it. So if you want to hear me read it. And I have a workbook and planner, The Resilient Actors Workbook and Planner. Also, if you go to debrawanger.com, that's WANGER.com, there's everything there. My books, my coaching, my public speaking, my singing, my acting gigs, all of it's right there. So debrawanger.com.
Yeah, you are truly a jack of all trades, master of all, was pretty much all of them, right? So you have a lot of skills, I think, to offer, and we covered so many really cool areas, and it's obvious that you are truly that kind of expert in multiple fields, like that polymath kind of personality where you can just kind of dig in and just totally understand. And it's funny because it seems like we covered the whole book, but I know there's so much more because we got so much on this podcast, but
it's funny. I feel like
I
we
derailed the
didn't mention it,
conversation too many times probably. So if you want to get the whole story, we got to get the book. And you said it's just debrawanger.com, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And next time I'm on, I'll tell you about my Deborah Wanger stories. So.
Okay, let's do it. But guys, that was really an awesome episode. And Deborah, thank you again for taking the time to share that. And this just gives us a glimpse too. And like the most competitive industry in the world, how people can still make it, how people can still find themselves in the same holes, or they can find themselves at the same peaks and valleys. It's just always, it doesn't matter where you might be in your journey or in your entrepreneurial journey, in your personal journey, in your relationship, or whatever it is. A lot of these tips and strategies and tactics that Deborah shared with us today will apply to you. And we got to explore some really interesting, an interesting glimpse of the Hollywood scene and the thespian scene and theater and the arts. And that's always something that's fascinating to me, as we sometimes get so analytical with all of our real estate stuff. It's fun to have a creative and an intellectual as well come onto this show and share with us how you manage in your strategy as well. So Deborah, once again, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks so much. It was fun.
All right, guys. Well, this is Winners, Wallets, and Worldviews. We bring winners, people crushing it in their different respective industries. Wallets, we talk about personal finance, real estate, wealth, and finally, worldviews. Sometimes we bring in the deepest values that drive some of these different success figures and highlight their stories and have some friendly debate and go from there. Well, thank you, guys. You can listen to this podcast at aaronjarmstrong.com/podcasts, or you can do it anywhere else you guys find your podcast: iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, iHeartRadio. We're everywhere. So thank you so much. Be somebody. All right.